My name is Adelaide Meadow, and I work as a traditional home birth midwife, as well as a movement teacher and a feminist organizer. And I see women in my Well Woman Care practice. So in addition to my midwifery practice, I run a small practice where I focus on women's health, everything that you would generally go to the gynecologist for. So I see women for a variety of pelvic health concerns. And we are now in a moment in history, if you had read the description, where we are in over 50% of our female population is having some degree of pelvic health concern, be it low back pain, SI joint pain, pelvic pain, painful sex, bladder incontinence, challenges healing from childbirth, prolapse. The entire gamut is now affecting more than half of our population, of our female population. And one, I would say, underutilized resource for addressing our pelvic health concerns is our movement practices. So many of the movement practices that we are taught were created by male bodies for male bodies, and then we are practicing them to the detriment of our overall female pelvic health. So we're going to hope to dispel that to some degree today. And we'll begin today by having a discussion and a lecture on female pelvic anatomy. This will be interactive, so you'll get to interact with your own pelvic bones, mapping your own pelvis. You'll be doing your own palpation, as well as hopefully deepening your understanding of how bony alignment, fascial tissue, or connective tissue, and muscle tissue all weave together to support your pelvic bowl, and how this can be done in a way that is ultimately supportive for your long-term pelvic health or to the detriment of your long-term pelvic health. So we'll be looking at that in a sort of discussion-based format. From there, we'll be moving into an asana practice that will be, I'm hoping, about 50 to 60 minutes long, where we will be addressing our female pelvic health through our movement. And this will include different cues that you might not be used to if you have a regular yoga practice. And I encourage you to be open-minded if you have been a yoga practitioner for a long time. Myself, I've been practicing for about 15 years and studied primarily in the Iyengar method. And so if you are, in your yoga practice and have been for a long time, I encourage you to maybe try the alternative ways that we'll be practicing certain postures in a way that hopefully will be more supportive for your long-time female pelvis. Any questions here before we get started? All right. So we'll get props in a minute because we're just going to be talking. But the first thing I want to do is introduce you to the female pelvis. And we're going to talk a little bit about the bony arrangement and how that contrasts with male pelvic anatomy. So we'll start looking at the model first, and we're actually going to stand up and do our own palpation, but just a little tour. And if you've been in my classes before, you probably have done this tour, but do we ever get enough pelvic health education? Probably not. So here in the front is our pubic bone. Right here, we have the superior pubic symphysis and the inferior pubic symphysis. These are just fancy names for the top and the bottom. And right here in the middle, we have a connective tissue, a fascial, tissue area that allows our pelvis to do this, allows the pubic bone to gap. This is unique in female pelvic anatomy. Also, then moving up along the sides, we have the ilium bones, as well as the whole side ilium, right? This is the socket for the hip called the acetabulum, same on both sides. These are our sits bones or ischial tuberosities on the bottom. And then in the back is our sacrum, our sacroiliac joints, so where our sacrum connects to our iliums, and our coccyx or tailbone at the bottom. So just a basic overview of the bones. What I would like you to notice here is the chalice-like shape of the female pelvis, that it is an open bowl. And this is to hold the female pelvic organs, which include not only our womb, but also our bladder, our rectum, and all of the tissue that makes up not just the pelvic floor, which is a common buzzword term, but also the inner pelvic, all of the inner pelvic anatomy. So it has this chalice-like shape in order to support those structures. How this differs from male pelvic anatomy is male pelvises are more in this uprighted shape. They do not have this same open chalice-like shape, but it's more square. If you also notice that these bottom regions are flaring or flanging outward, that doesn't actually happen in the male pelvis. It's actually just more uprighted in totality. The other thing that is unique about the female pelvis is we have a more exaggerated curvature in our sacrum. So our sacral bone has this more of a concavity, meaning there's a dishing within the sacrum as it's shining into the middle of the pelvis, versus in male pelvic anatomy, it is actually a flatter bony arrangement. Feeling clear so far? The other primary differences have to do with the bottom of the pelvis, so the shape of our ischial tuberosities. As I said before, in men, or as I said prior, not only does the top of the pelvis or the inlet change, but also the angle of these ischial tuberosities, of these inferior pubic bones, is flanged out to the side. And in men, it's more uprighted. So it doesn't have this angle, but it's actually angled more in, just like the ilium bones of the pelvic inlet. So why does this matter? Well, the variation of our bones is going to inform how the muscle lays on the bone, as well as how the organs are supported by the bones. So we're going to now look at the alignment of the female pelvis. So a neutral female pelvic alignment is in this orientation. So this uprighted shape versus this tilted forward shape. This is often called an anterior pelvic tilt. However, I would suggest is only anterior if we are using the male body as the standard, right? So I might add that this is neutral and men are posterior. So just noting where we have some misogyny built into our physiological language there. But we're going to call, for the sake of today and clarity, that this is an anterior tilt, meaning it's tilted forward. Why this is unique and important to look at in our yoga practice is so often we have these cues of upright the pelvic bowl, or draw the tailbone down, or zip up in the frontal abdomen, or hug from your pubic bone up to your navel. And while there's no action that is inherently wrong in the body, our body is designed to do a variety of different actions. The chronic use of that pelvic alignment is one of the primary underlying postural patterns that leads to later pelvic dysfunction. And we're going to talk about why. So if we're looking in this bony arrangement, what this allows for is these inferior bones of the pubic symphysis to be kind of at the bottom, right, at the floor of our pelvis. So it's creating structural support for the organs that rest within the bowl, primarily the bladder and the womb, and the uterus, right? Versus if we're in this uprighted shape, which leans itself to actually drawing the tailbone in towards the pubis, we are quite literally, or even if we're posteriorly tilted, truly posterior, it's quite literally creating a slide. So it's allowing our pelvic organs to drop and descend, right? And can we all see this? How just that simple shift creates this downward descent of our pelvic organs. The other thing that is going to create that is an over-firming of the low abdomen. So if we're forever kind of shoving back and interested in this, we have a culture that's very interested in abdominal engagement, and specifically like abs for women. What that can look like, if we're modeling what abdominal strength is after male physiology, is an over-firming of this musculature in the front. And that over-firming can lift the pubic bone and also then be providing a lot of pressure inward towards the womb. So if we've lifted the pubic bone and are having the significant pressure back without the support, even from the bones or the connective tissue that is allowed to support you based on the pelvic bony alignment, we're creating this pressurized system where we're hugging back, and that overall creates downward descent, right? In both of our tissues, in our pelvic floor tissues, as well as the organ matter and other connective tissue that lives within the inside of the pelvis. Is that feeling clear? All right, so when I ask a question, because I can't really see all of you because you're trying to do this, so I'm like, yes, I know that there's some registration going on in the brain. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. All right, so what does this mean? How can we address this? Well, in much of our yoga practice, we have cues that are oriented towards uprighting the pelvis. You've probably heard this and like, don't spill forward or backward. But what that is actually based on is male pelvic alignment, which has this upright shape, versus teaching our musculature to be truly supportive of an innate female pelvic postural alignment. And what this requires is a more spacious arrangement in your pelvic floor, as well as a stronger and more contracted muscular engagement in the whole posterior chain. It also requires a softening of lower abdominal tissues and a strengthening of upper abdominal tissues. So more stable up here, which allows this to be a little softer. The last component is the movement of the diaphragm. And we're going to actually begin our asana practice with the diaphragmatic engagement practice that is based on linking our diaphragm to our pelvic floor tissues. Capiche? Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the internal pelvic musculature versus the external pelvic musculature. So before we get to that, I'll just say a little bit about muscles in general. So muscles have a primary action, and that primary action is supplicity, meaning the ability to extend and contract, right? Rather than a muscle being tight, which I'm famous for saying there's no such thing as a tight muscle, right? A muscle is often struggling with immobility, right? So I just want us to replace that feeling or that, language of my XYZ is tight with my XYZ is immobile, right? Or another word for immobile I use is locked. And a muscle that is locked long is a muscle that struggles to contract. And a muscle that is locked short is a muscle that struggles to extend, right? However, both of those muscles feel tight to us because the sensation of feeling tight is a sensation of immobility, right? One thing that often occurs is when we have a muscle that feels tight, and where this is really commonly true is in the outer hips, and how many women are like, oh, I have tight hips, or I've done pigeon pose for 10 years and my hip, mobility hasn't increased significantly. Does anybody feel like they have had that significant? Like I see some hands waving. That's largely because those muscles are locked, and they're, for the most part, in the vast majority of female bodies, they are locked long, meaning they struggle to contract. And then we'll be in a state of wanting to stretch or lengthen that musculature, when in reality, it actually needs to contract in order to regain mobility, which is going to give us that mobility that we're craving in our hips that would overall make us more comfortable and functional and, mobile. So what generally happens as a result of this female pelvic, of this sort of less optimal, suboptimal female pelvic posture, is as the pelvic bowl becomes uprighted, modeling after the male standard, the tailbone naturally curls in. Versus if we're in this anterior shape, we can see how the tailbone would naturally move back. This is also a unique anatomical feature of the female pelvis in that we have mobile sacroiliac joints. Men also have mobile sacroiliac joints, but to a far less degree, to a lesser degree, I should say. And that's because they don't have mobile pelvic bones designed for vaginal birth. So when we are saying to someone with a male pelvis to upright the pelvis and tuck the tailbone or draw the tailbone down, they're actually going to have less mobility for the most part, right? If we're giving that cue to a man, this draw the tailbone down isn't going to create a significant amount of mobility. Versus in the female body, we can actually engage that quite significantly and move the tailbone towards the pubis. One cue that I've often heard and also said myself in previous lifetimes of my teaching is the tailbone and the pubic bone are long lost lovers. They're always looking to find each other, right? This is a classic cue in Iyengar yoga. But what that does over time is it shortens the muscles of all of our inner pelvic musculature. It shortens the pelvic floor. So we're in this state where the tailbone is moving towards the pubis and the sit bones are moving towards one another. If this happens over time, this musculature is going to become locked short, right? It's going to then struggle to extend. And the primary action of muscles, again, is supplicity, the ability to extend and contract. And so a muscle that lacks that ability to move is going to atrophy. And this is true whether it's your bicep or your quadricep or your feet, right? Muscles that aren't moving are going to atrophy. And a lack or minimization of the mobility in the pelvic floor is going to cause atrophy in the pelvic floor. It also is often, I don't know how many women here have ever had pelvic floor PT or even just had pelvic pain or just felt like, oh, I'm really tight. This feels really tight. Or even that feeling of having penetrative sex and you're like, oh, this is tight, right? That tightness is usually a locked shortness due in part to this postural pattern. So if our inner pelvic floor muscles are locked short, there is always a muscle or always a compensatory muscle group that is locked long. So I'll give you an example of this using my bicep, right? So imagine, right, here's my bicep. And if I was in this locked short state, right? So say this is coming to a 10, and then that's maybe a 7, right? And if I was just moving between 7 and 10, this muscle would over time atrophy, right? It's not moving in full range. So that would mean my bicep would be locking short. If this bicep is locking short, it'd mean my tricep is locking long, because it's only moving, if we're going with the number analogy, say from 1 to a 3, 1 to a 3, as opposed to this is a 1 fully extended and this is a 10 fully contracted. And it's moving in a compensatory way with my bicep. Is that concept feeling clear to everyone? Great. So let's think about it in regards to our pelvis. So if we're in the shortened pelvic muscular state, what is likely locked long is all of our external pelvic muscles. Here I'm talking about our 3 gluteals, our 3 hamstrings, our QL and our spinal erectors and our low back. I like to say that your hips and low back are best friends, right? Don't think about them as a different structure. They're best friends. They hang out, everything they do together, right? So if you have this locked long musculature in the low back, locked long musculature in the gluteals, locked long musculature in the hamstrings, right? It struggles to contract. And therefore, all of these muscles are going to be essentially strapped to the bones, right? In this lengthened state, and it's going to continue allowing this shortened pelvic floor orientation. What this looks like commonly in the body, and this is me, many years ago, and maybe to some degree still today, is I was super mobile. I was like yoga teacher girl. I could like forward bend all day, put my palms on the floor, having a lot of mobility. This often looks like women who are quite flexible, right? And let me just see how many people like, I can easily touch my toes. I've never had a problem with that, right? So what that often means is we're in that lengthened state. And I'll just show you standing up for just a moment. If I'm, here, let me arrange this camera for a minute. Okay. So if I'm here, right, and then I'm forward folding, I'm actually lengthening all of this musculature from here all the way down and coming into this fully lengthened, extended shape. And I can feel this, right, all the way up through my whole posterior chain. Right? So what that is doing, and then say, oh, my hips and back are so tight. Why don't I just forward bend and stretch them even more? And over time, that is only going to exacerbate the postural pattern that is likely causing the pain in the first place. What this can often look like is low back pain, painful sex, sciatic pain, pudendal nerve entrapment, piriformis tightness, right? Which are really common, right? We probably hear them all the time. I would say I've heard them from the majority of my female yoga students over the years. So what is going to be supportive? Moving out of this postural alignment and not practicing movements that are specifically designed to recreate that dysfunctional postural pattern, right? Which unfortunately, and I know I've been a student of Georgia, so I take her class. I love a lot of the work that she does, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. But I would say in a lot of yoga classes I've taken over the years, there is so much of this emphasis on a lengthening of the posterior chain and a shortening of the anterior chain, which is entirely based on male pelvic anatomy and function. And if it was ultimately supporting women, we wouldn't have this degree of pelvic dysfunction, right? And I definitely have seen women in my practice who are yoga teachers and Pilates teachers who are experiencing prolapse or pelvic descent in their 20s, who've never had a child, right? So we need to just rethink this whole situation and reorganize our practice around female pelvic longevity. So what does this look like? It can be quite simple in that how we orient our breath in relationship to our pelvic floor, how we activate our musculature in a variety of different poses can make all the difference in the world. So what we're going to be focusing on today is not what postures are okay, but what actions are supportive. So whatever shape we want to do in the body, can we accomplish this shape while maintaining actions, muscular actions, and respiratory actions that are supportive for our pelvic alignment, right? And if we begin to understand how those actions feel in the body, we can bring them into whatever practice we want to do. And therefore that practice can be supportive of our long-term pelvic health. So this is rather than saying something is good for women's bodies or bad for women's bodies. It's the devil's in the details, so to speak, and how we do things and how we care for ourselves within the practices that we're doing is that chocolate peanut butter combination, right? It's the difference between moving, out of dysfunction and into more optimal function. All right, that was my 25 minutes or my 20-minute discussion. Are there any questions about this before we stop chatting and start actually feeling the body and moving into a female alignment practice? And like, please, you can actually ask questions, right? It's because everyone will be benefiting if you do have one.
I'm all set, but I just want to say thank you because that was really, really interesting and informative.
Oh, I'm so glad. Great.
I have a question.
Yes.
I've been dealing with, I was told by my chiropractor, it's like SI joints. I feel like it especially, it especially hurts during like my luteal and menstrual phases. And it kind of almost feels like it inflames. And yeah, I'm a yoga teacher myself, but I have a yoga teacher I go to, and she always says, forward fold, lengthen that low back. And I don't feel like it helps. And so hearing this now, I'm like, like so happy. So thank you.
Totally. Yeah. I also had really severe SI joint dysfunction. I went to the chiropractor several times a week for years. I broke my pelvis and it was really bad. And I now can say I just like don't experience it that anymore. And the primary thing is I stopped forward bending. It's not that I don't forward bend as part of my life. Of course I do. You just watched me do a forward bend, but I'm not working to deepen my forward bends. And ironically, I actually have more range of motion now, right? From not practicing forward bends, but mobilizing the whole posterior chain, right? Which for me and for many yoga teachers and mobile women in general, comes with a contraction of that whole posterior chain. So if you've ever taken Georgia's cake classes, right? This is one thing I love about them is I don't know if you still teach these, Georgia, but is there's a whole, it's like so much of it is about like, get your butt to engage. Can you get your hamstrings to engage? Can you get your back body to engage? And that's really going to be supportive over time. And one more thought just on that particular comment. If our musculature that is supporting our sacroiliac joints, and you also mentioned it being related to your menstrual phase. And I have a whole course that's coming out about movement specifically for the female body, about the like moving throughout our menstrual cycle, because depending on where we are in our cycle, we're gonna have very different sort of alignment and physiological and hormonal underpinnings to our movement practice. So asterisks if you want, just follow me if you're interested in that. But what is happening during our luteal and menstrual phase is we're having an increase in relaxin. And relaxin is a muscle that loosens the weave of our connective tissue. So if your muscles aren't really plumping off the bone, so to speak, to support these SI joints, and then therefore all that's really supporting them is your connective tissue, and then you have a loosening of that weave of the connective tissue. This is also true for pregnant and postpartum women, and you're postpartum for the rest of your life. So if you've had a baby, this applies to you. That loosening of your connective tissue weave, if that's all that's supporting you, now you have a severe lack of support in general because your connective tissue isn't doing it and your musculature isn't doing it. And what that means is our bones can move in ways that can strum the nerves. And our pelvis is incredibly innervated, right? We have a ton of nerves, our sciatic nerve bundle, our pudendal nerve bundle, all of our sexually stimulated, or all of our sort of arousal tissues that live within the pelvis. So if we aren't actually supporting, then we can be moving our bones in ways and our muscles in ways that are, I think really the term strumming is quite accurate, onto the nerve bundles, which creates that sort of sharp firing nerve sensations within the pelvic bowl. So I hope that even clarifies a little more of physiological underpinning and is validating to what you were just sharing. Okay, any other questions here? All right, so we're gonna move into a practice that will take us all the way up to 11:30 to the hour. So before we get started, I want you to set yourselves up with a variety of different props. And if you don't have them, you're perfect. If you do have them, you're perfect, right? But we'll see what we can get. I suggest having a yoga strap, a block, right? If you have 2 blocks, hooray. As well as 2 blankets or towels. Does anybody not have that stuff? Oh my gosh, you're the best Zoom yoga class of all time. I lied. There's one other essential prop. So if you're still listening to me, add this to your list. You need a chair. And this chair can be like a step stool. It can be the chair that's in the room that you've got. Any chair that is, an average chair seat height, which is approximately 16 inches off the floor. So go get that. I also see a few mamas here with the babies. Love that. Please continue snuggling your babies. This is going to be relevant to you as well, even if you're just not doing the recording at this time. But there will be certain stuff that I encourage you to participate in if you can put your baby down. And if you can't, you're also doing the best work in the world, right? So, all right, let me set this up so you can see my whole body, hopefully.
Yeah, Adelaide, real quick, I just want to thank you for the audio message you sent me prior to this class. And just noting that I have had 2 babies in 2 years, and notably not had like a super consistent, I didn't have like a super consistent physical practice like during pregnancy, and like definitely kind of like pushed through the postpartum period after my first, and then like really integrating that whole experience and realizing like how essential it is to like really have that like rest period. But that I didn't really get that after this babe. I want to put it out there. I'm really interested in the healing that my body needs. Have notable discomfort in the womb space, and so yeah, I don't know if you have any like, if you sort of have like a vision for this class, or if it's going to be kind of like a flow thing for you, but like noting what might not be good for me to like do.
Totally.
In my
I hear you. So this class is going to be a yoga class, right? So just keep that in mind. That being said, I highly recommend, I do have a webinar called A Healing Movement for the First 40 Days that would be super useful to you, even though you might be just out of your first 40 days postpartum. It'll go into a lot of what we're doing here, but some just really healthful and supportive movements during that time. Also, if you're interested more specifically in pelvic floor healing, I have another webinar about prolapse, and whether you're experiencing prolapse or not, that would be useful. And then in terms of you being in your first 8 weeks postpartum and doing this, I would just chill the fuck out. You're 8 weeks postpartum. Take some deep breaths and don't sweat it. Yeah. This recording is going to be here for you. And if there's anything that you're like, that sounds lovely, I would say maybe the breath work that we're about to start with, as well as the bridging sequence at the beginning, I would stay away from the standing poses until you feel more pelvic supported. Okay. We're going to go ahead and get started here, but we're actually going to begin standing. So come to stand, and I'm going to be spotlighting myself so I can see what y'all are seeing. That being said, I will come and check in periodically to look at your alignment. And if you do have questions, just come off mute so I can hear you. Okay. Can y'all see me loud and clear? All right. So let's start by taking a magical mystery tour of our pelvic bones. So begin in the front by palpating your pubic bone. So if you're unsure where that is, locate your clitoral hood and then move a few inches north, and you'll start to feel that pubic symphysis. We use the word symphysis, like symphony, like coming together, right? And where it's those 2 halves of our pubic bone align. And you'll feel, if you kind of feel up that midline, right? Maybe it's a little tender in there, right? That's okay. Right? And just as you're doing this, notice if you're in an alignment where your pubic bone is pushing forward, and just even right here from the get-go, can you use your fingertips to draw your whole pelvis back, right? That is that initial action of engagement and moving into that adjusted female pelvic posture. You can actually see this quite well through the line of my leggings. And notice if you feel like you're feeling forward, that's fine. We'll address that in a little bit. But working here, now I'm going to have you work up sort of through that underwear line, groin line, until you find your frontal hip bones, or those bones in the front called your ASIS bones, or your as-is bones. I like to call them your as-is bones because we want them to stay as is, right? This, where one is hiked up, right? We'll often do it on the same side in a repetitive postural pattern. That can, be one of the underlying discomfort causes. So keeping them even and balanced as much as we can. It'll be here, and then continue to walk along that top rim of your pelvic bones. This is your iliac crest. Right? So this like hook where you push down and you feel the bone all the way around until you come to your sacroiliac joints in the back, those 2 little dimples. Just give them a little massage with your thumbs, and then give me some flashers if you're like, these are sore, right? Just so I know. All right, so that's many of you. Okay, so this is hopefully supportive. So you're just be massaging them a little bit, feel what there is to feel there, and then continue walking down, walk your fingertips down your sacrum, right, all the way down, until you're gonna begin to open the crease of the buttocks. So in order to do that, I was just stepping your feet slightly wide, turning your toes in somewhat. I'm gonna do this from the front first. And then you're gonna bend your knees and lift your buttock until you can locate your anal mouth. And from there, right, I know this might seem weird, but that's okay. You're gonna reach into the buttock crease and feel your coccyx. You're looking for this sit bone all the way at the bottom, right? And if you're like, oh, it's sore, or I can't find it because my buttock flesh is perfectly ample, like that's cool, but just knowing where it is gonna be helpful, right? And then from here, take your other hand and reach around, reach through your legs and connect your fingers if you can, right? And then walk, start maybe over to my left hand's the back, my right hand's the front. I'm walking over to the left and I'm finding my sit bone, right? And you don't have to dig in there, okay? But as I'm finding my sit bone, I'm like, okay, I feel it. And I'm gonna walk all the way from my sit bone underneath the pelvis, dun, 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 until I come back to the pubic symphysis in the front, right? They're connected, right? So our sit bones are part of our pubic bone, right? Key component. We don't think of it that way, but were we all able to find this connection, sit bone back through the pelvis towards the pubis? Hooray. All right, let's do it on the other side. So Magic School Bus round 2, pubic bone all the way up your iliac crest, walking back around, finding your sacrum, all the way down your sacrum, finding your coccyx, right? Reaching around, maybe you're switching hands this time, finding your sit bone and feeling how close that is to your coccyx. That's a distance that we're going to be interested in increasing today, right? And then moving from your sit bone back around, right? All the way to your pubis. Capiche? Now that you know where your pelvic bones are, we're going to refer to them consistently throughout this class. So we'll use them as bony landmarks in all of our cueing. The last thing I want you to notice, because we're going to begin in a pranayama, sorry, I'm like decapitated. We'll begin in a pranayama or breathwork practice, is the concavity of this lower part of your sacrum. When we're going to begin laying down, the interest I have for you is imagine there was a little weight right here, like a little, like a penny weight or something that is weighting this area, this concave area just above the coccyx down, right? And then even as the rest of the pelvis is moving, this is not going to occur. You're not going to have this moving up and in of the coccyx because you'll have this weight, this imaginary weight in the lower sacrum. Okay.
It's Jacqueline. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll get into this, but as we get into the standing poses, I'd be interested to hear about standing on a yoga mat versus standing in real life. Because I know I'm one of those people when I'm standing in real life and then I feel like I need to stand up straighter, I actually tuck my pelvis a little bit, which is probably not what I'm supposed to be doing because otherwise I feel like it's sticking out. But sometimes I find poses in yoga aren't necessarily what we do in real life. So if you could do that translation as we go through, that'd be great.
Totally. We're going to have a whole discussion on Tadasana and what it means to stand in alignment with your female physical anatomy, which I would argue you can do on your yoga mat and waiting in line. So cool. Great question. We'll totally get to that. Okay. Coming to lay down on the mat is where we will begin here. So I'll have us do a little setup. And I would like you to utilize your 2 blankets and you work with what you got. But I have one here that I'm laying down. And early postpartum mamas, this part will be lovely for you likely, right? And then I have another one. This will support my skull, the back of my head. And as I come down, right, I'm going to plant myself right in the middle of this blanket, and I'm going to adjust this below my skull. From there, I'll come into a knee bent position, this constructive rest shape. And just notice here, your neutral pelvic alignment, your neutral, right? And I actually took this term from Georgia, I feel like years ago, that we're going to be working to an adjusted neutral alignment, right? So basic neutral and then adjusted neutral. I want you to imagine or take a little diamond with your hands and put that diamond where your thumbs are just below your navel and your pointer fingers are on your pubic bone. Notice here, or just imagine here that you had a marble, right? I think I took this from you, Georgia, right? That you had a marble in between your fingers. And I want you to articulate your pelvis, so really tip your pelvis so that that marble is either centered or rolling slightly towards your pubic bone, meaning slightly away from your navel. And what you'll likely feel here is a gapping of your low back off the ground, right? That's cool. That's what we're going for. As you have that gapping, that lift of your SI joints, you're going to take your blanket and you're going to smush it all in, supporting your low back, right? So all along your side. So you're in this shape, this adjusted neutral pelvic shape, but you don't have to work too hard, right? The pelvis, the blanket's there to support you. You're then also going to walk it around to the front of your sit bones. So like into that pelvic floor. So you're in this little nest and you're going to chill. And hopefully this feels pretty dang comfy. We'll now move into a pranayama practice here. One thing that tends to happen initially, and you can see this, I'm exaggerating it right now, is that when I begin to untuck my tailbone, I actually just shove my ribs and my nipple line forward. So there isn't true articulation happening in the low spine. Instead, it's my mid back, my sort of lower shoulder blades that are drawing forward. I would say this lower shoulder blade back of the broad band area is also a common place for discomfort, specifically for moms. And so this will hopefully be addressing that as well. So bringing your hands to the front of your ribs, take a wide breath in where you're feeling your ribs expand laterally, east and west into your hands. And then as you exhale, just relax. And just notice what happens. We'll do that 2 more times. So inhale, focus on a lateral expansion. And then exhale, relax. Once more, inhale, a lateral expansion. And soften. We're going to continue breathing in this fashion, where rather than belly breathing, which I would argue might be contraindicated for the vast majority of women, we're going to focus on lateral rib breathing. So as you inhale now, feel not only your side ribs expand, but also your back ribs draw down into the floor below you. And then as you exhale, can you blow out birthday candles and feel your frontal ribs cuff towards one another. They move towards the midline. We'll move through that a few more times here. So you're inhaling to widen both the side and back ribs. And then exhale, like you're blowing out birthday candles. Feel your ribs taper into the midline. One more time, just like that. And this time, try going like like you're shushing someone, and see how that feels on your ribs. So look like this. And you'll see which, either the blowing of the birthday candles or the shushing, allows for more of those frontal upper ribs coming towards the midline. So continue breathing in that fashion with a focus on rib mobility, both lateral, side to side, and posterior, meaning moving into the mat. And the inhale is widening the body. The inhale is expanding, and that makes sense. The lungs are filling with air, so therefore our whole diaphragmatic and chest cavity should expand. And the exhale is emptying the lung balloons, and therefore tapering all of our sort of torso and rib basket towards the midline. As you continue with this breath practice, I want you to notice if your pelvis, if your tailbone specifically, and you know where it is, you just found it, is trying to tuck upwards, is trying to press your low back to the floor, specifically on the exhale, right? And instead, you're going to resist that. And it hopefully shouldn't be too hard because you have this supported blanket, so that actually your inhale is pressing your bra band into the floor below you. And your exhale is drawing those frontal ribs together. But the pelvis is staying stable and supported. So if that is feeling complex to you, you stick with that, and that's your pranayama, that's your breath work. If you feel like, okay, I can coordinate that, we're going to move on to thinking about it in relationship to our pelvic floor. I say pelvic floor because it's the term that people are familiar with, but I really mean the entire musculature within the pelvic bowl. So it's not just the floor, it's not just the bottom, it's everything that that moves upward and inserts into our posterior and lateral, or to like all of the sides of our vaginal wall, and also all the sides of our rectum. So the musculature moves up and in. So the image I would like you to have here is of your tailbone, right? In that area, that little concave area just above your tailbone, right? That I pointed out to you on the pelvic model. Can you imagine that there's a weight there keeping that specific point grounded, right? So that is clear, right? Have that be the bell clear image in your brain. And now imagine that there is a thread tied from that area all the way to your pubic bone. So it's coming along the line of your perineum, moving likely from your anal mouth up the perineum, through the vulva, right, up sort of over the clitoral hood and attaching to your pubis. That's one thread. Just imagine her down there in the pelvis. Now there's another thread that is moving side to side laterally, and it's from one sit bone to the other sit bone, right? And if you're like, where are my sit bones? Just like wiggle around. They're not on the ground right now, but that wiggling might help you remember where they are in your pelvic alignment. So imagine you have a thread moving from your left sit bone to your right sit bone. And you still have that thread moving from that concavity at the base of your sacrum all the way up to your pubis. You have these two golden threads. You know what they look like. You're picturing them in your brain. And now imagine where they cross. They're going to cross likely at the back of your vulvar opening, right? At the back of the vulva, sort of between the anal mouth and the vulva, right? So they have that point of intersection. As you inhale and the diaphragm widens and your back ribs press down, I want you to imagine that these threads become gently taut so that the pelvic floor opens. Imagining the sit bones gently widening, the tailbone is heavy, and everything is becoming gently taut. So there's a spaciousness being found in those threads. That's the breath in. And now as you exhale, picture where those two threads cross. As you exhale, that point lifts up as you breathe out. And so you get this subtle pyramid shape in the pelvic floor. I'll say that again. You inhale, back ribs press into the mat. Your threads become gently taut. The pelvis is opening. And exhale, the pelvic bones are staying open, but the musculature within is lifting, like you're pulling up on those threads ever so slightly. One more time, just like that. Inhaling, the pelvic bones are gently drawn apart. Exhaling, they stay apart, which gives them the structure required for those inner pelvic muscles to lift up. Continue breathing in this fashion, right? This inhale down, exhale, subtle lift. And what I want to draw to your attention is this is not a Kegel, right? This is not squeezing everything. Because squeezing everything would actually be sort of congesting and hugging to the midline, right? Instead, there is this buoyancy, this subtle lift that's happening from the breath. That lift can't actually occur if the bones don't stay stable, right? If the bones are what's moving in and out, then the muscles have nothing to pull against, right? So we're in this neutral alignment. This is what allows for a buoyant movement of our pelvic floor. Take 2 more breaths in quiet. And if you can't feel this happening, that's okay. Just imagine that it's happening, because neural pathways are the first step to creating movement within the body. One more round of breath here. Beautiful women. If you take nothing else from this course, from this workshop, let it be this breath practice. This is the foundation for all healing, I would say, in your low back, pelvic floor, intervaginal muscles, is this specific pranayama. Okay, feeling clear so far? And now I want you to press your feet down, right? And walk them. My feet are, I don't know, just about under my knees, maybe slightly forward. And can you just push one heel into the floor and then the other? So you're activating your buttocks and my hips are moving slightly. I'm still interested in my inhale, widening my back body, my exhale, tapering my frontal ribs, right? That cue is often knitting your frontal ribs together is one cue that we'll hear. Hopefully that cue is clarified now, right? But as you're pushing into one heel and then the other, you'll start to feel your pelvis rocking slightly right to left. Can you just notice that action? This is the action, or one of the actions of walking, is this subtle pelvic shift right and left. And if you notice, this actually feels a little tiring in your low back when you are in this slight anterior tilt. That's a good indication that you might be walking with your tailbone tucked if just doing this subtle action is fatiguing, which is okay. That's what we're here to learn about. From here, push down into both of your feet. And now imagine that weight at the bottom of your sacrum, right? That weight is going to stay, but as you push into the feet, you're going to gently lift the hips up, maybe just like a few inches, right? But what you're resisting is the urge to tuck the tailbone. So that cue of extend your tailbone towards the backs and knees, I want you to forget that. And instead, I want you to imagine that orientation of your pelvis is staying the same, that your SI joints are what's leading the way as you begin to lift. This likely brings more sensation into your low back, right? That's okay. We need not be afraid of sensation in the low back. We're actually interested in building strength there. From here, imagine you are hugging a block, or like a squishy ball, I would like even more, between your knees or between your lower thighs. And feel what that does to your whole outer pelvic musculature. You're turning on what's often locked short. Before you go any higher, remove any propping from behind the neck, so your back of your neck can be free. And then as you place your hands on your hips, continue untucking your tailbone. So pubic bone is weighted down, push into your heels, and you're going to lift it to a bridge pose. But this bridge pose is likely different from what you have previously experienced. Maybe not, right? But if this is different, just go with it, right? You're untucking your tailbone, you're pushing into your heels, and now here, can you begin to alternate? Just slight pressure, right heel, left heel, right heel, left heel. If you're already tired, join the club. I'm literally already exhausted from this, and I do it all the time. Good. Have you inhaled lately or exhaled lately? And if you haven't, I suggest putting them back on your list of things to do. Good. And then pushing firmly into the feet, hug both of the knees together. Can you now, from those mid buttocks, keeping the tailbone untucked, lift up an inch and down an inch, up an inch and down an inch. You're gonna do this about 20 times. And can you maybe bring your hands to your side ribs, continuing to encourage them to breathe and expand laterally on the inhale, and cuff together on the exhale. If you're feeling this in your low back and not the buttocks, push more firmly into the feet, and then imagine you could pull your heels back towards you so your hamstrings alight. For 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stick with me. Heel toe your left foot one step to the midline. Holding on to your frontal hips, right? Find those frontal hip bones, those ASIS bones, and you're going to effort to keep them even as you put more weight into your left foot and bring your right leg into a table pose. Right? If that right hip dipped down, put your right hip back on the floor and just imagine you would lift it, right? So you're still using that muscular engagement. From there, think lift up an inch and down an inch, up an inch and down for 8, 7, 6, 5. Hug the heel towards the buttock for 3, 2, 1. Stick with me. Extend that top leg. Lower to hip height. Just 2 more. Lower to knee height, I should have said. And lift. 1 more. Lower to knee height and lift. Stick with me. Can you lower down, not articulating bone by bone, but just settling back into your nest, and then your right foot rejoins your left. Breathe wide. Exhaling. Reset and relift. Coming back into that bridge pose for our second side, your untucked tailbone posture, your activated posterior chain, heel tilt your right foot into the midline. And now pushing into that right heel, bring your left foot up, knee comes into table pose. Right? If you need to brace slightly with your upper arms, that's chill. Right? Notice if when you do this, you're unable to keep those frontal ASIS bones level, in which case put that foot down and just minimize the weight on your left foot. You don't have to lift it all the way. If you're here with me, you're gonna lift for 8, 7, 6, 5, continue, but notice the urge to shove your nipples towards the sky and instead keep your back body heavier. 2 and 1, extend, lower to knee height just 3 times and lift, knee height and lift, knee height and lift, and then slowly lower down. Oh, and here you are. Thank God, that was so hard. Right, and now you're back in your pelvic nest. Take a breath in, wide the ribs. Breath out. Good, and you feel the echo of support, right? The neural mist, as my teacher calls it, within the whole pelvic region, right? That's one thing we're trying to maintain. From there, just lift your pelvis up a little bit, remove the blanket, set off to the side, and we'll do a little sacral tapping, right? So lift an inch and drop. Lift an inch and drop. Not lift and lower, lift and drop. And then just do this a few times. So you're sort of thumping, gently tapping your sacrum on the ground. Having this tapping or percussive action in the pelvis is a great precursor to learning to actually jump with pelvic integrity. So all those mamas out there, or even not mamas, who are like, whew, I feel like I'm gonna pee my pants if I jump on a trampoline. This is a great thing to practice. And pick up the pace and do it for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, good job. And now from here, picking up the hips, skipping them to one side, on the care bridge side, laying onto the side and pressing yourself up. Noticing that I didn't sort of jackknife or rock and roll to seat it. It's very hard to maintain your diaphragmatic breathing in that shape. So just know that I generally avoid that, specifically in the postpartum period. Coming over onto your table pose. Grab the blanket that was underneath your head, right, or towel, and you're gonna roll it into approximately a yoga mat sized situation. And then coming down onto it, I'm going to press it right below, sorry, I wasn't too graceful, right below my breast tissue. So right onto the ribs. So now we're addressing the tendency for the ribs to flare as we're trying to untuck our pelvis. So instead, we're gonna come down, and I'm resting my forearms on the back of I'm resting my forehead on the back of my hands. My toes are gently pointed in as my heels are gently rotated outwards. There's a spreading in the buttock flesh. I'm actually gonna lift my head so you can hear me more easily, but your head is down. And notice as you're here that you can naturally untuck the tailbone. Just being belly down creates that subtle neutrality in the pelvis because it minimizes the ability for us to push our pubic bone forward. So you're in that adjusted female pelvis, but now you're also having the sense of extension in the back. Yeah, this mid back lifting up. This hopefully feels amazing. And if it doesn't, just lift your head a little bit, support yourself on your elbows so it's not quite so deep. Just take 3 breaths here. As you breathe, can you focus on the lifting of the back body? And notice if you're actually squeezing your buttock and pushing your pubic bone into the ground, can your pubic bone stay light, gently tapping the ground even as your ribs are moving in? Beautiful. Maintaining this shape in the upper body, bend the knees. Right, so your feet are going to shine towards the ceiling. Right. You can either choose to keep your head down. I'm actually going to lift my head just so you can hear me right? But you could come into this Sphinx pose, though this is a little harder, right? As I'm here, I'm just going to squeeze left buttock, right buttock, without shoving my pubic bone to the ground, right? And now I will imagine, maybe this is going to happen, maybe it won't, that I could lift a knee up and push my foot towards the ceiling. So I'm sort of stamping on the ceiling. And begin alternating here. We'll do 10 on each side, right? Still activating in the glutes and the low back, right? While the ribs move in for 5, 5, 4, 4. You got the gist. You're sort of walking in the thighs. The belly is soft, but the upper abdominals are engaged. They're moving away from, or like the bolster blanket roll is encouraging them to move towards the spine, and pause. Okay. Can you gently connect the insoles of the feet in any amount? Act as though you could lift the knees up. Notice if you're clenching around your anus. Relax that to any degree. The knees probably won't lift. For 3, 2, and release. Whew, so hard. Bring your hands underneath the blanket roll. Elbows hugging back, chin down, widening in the rib basket, widening in the shoulder blades. So notice that this is someplace where you'd usually pinch your shoulder blades together, right? Instead, feel as though they could widen east to west as well as your collarbones. Pick your pubic bone up off the floor. Pick your navel up off the floor. So you're balancing on those frontal ribs. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, leading with the pelvis, press to your table pose. All right, those are mediocre. We're gonna try that again. Slowly lower down, catch your ribs. All right. This is sort of a version of knees, chest, chin. Right? So you're pushing the knees down, you're lifting the pubic bone up, the ribs are coming in, right? You're widening in the collarbones and the shoulder blades. You push down to lift up. Really nice, women. Beautiful. Now unrolling your blanket, just so you can set your knees upon it. We'll come into a table pose. Planting the hands, I like a subtle turnout. So I'm sort of at 11 and 1, spreading the fingers, right? Stacking my shoulders above my wrists and pressing into the floor. Take a breath in here. Exhale, blow out those birthday candles. You can watch my frontal ribs in this profile. So I'd inhale to widen. See my back lift slightly, and I exhale, and my front lifts slightly. From here, we're going to move into a cat and cow, but they'll be slightly adjusted. As you inhale and draw your collarbones wide, and you're drawing your shoulder blades back, can you imagine you're pulling your hands apart on the mat? So rather than hugging your shoulder blades together, they're widening. And then as you exhale, can you move that broad band up towards the ceiling? And then rather than tucking the tailbone under, feel like you could reach it back behind you. So you're actually lengthening the discus material between your vertebrae. Oh, it feels amazing for me. Do that a few more times. Lifting the chest, so feeling so you can pull them out apart with the palms. And then rounding, lifting the low back, lifting your mid broad band back, thoracic spine as you reach the tailbone behind you. Notice the tendency to actually rock back. That's fine, right? But see if you can stay stacked over your shoulders, tailbone reaches back. One more just like that, women. Now coming to your table pose, right? Pausing here, you're gonna reach your left leg directly to the left. So I'm gonna pivot to face you. Left leg directly to the left, okay? Maintaining this structure, you're gonna look at that left leg and you're gonna imagine you could hug the foot, right? Towards the inner line of the pelvic floor. Or towards your right knee would be another way to put that. Now look at your left foot and see the arch of the foot and that inner left ankle bone. Can you lift that inner left ankle bone up? Sort of lengthening and pressing down into the outer blade of the foot. And now maybe use your hand or just imagine with your brain, but there is a line of tissue that runs all the way up that inseam of the leg from the arch of the foot and inserts along the cervix. So it will run all the way up into that left vaginal canal, all the way up to the top. So just have that awareness in your mind, right? You're engaging where there's movement all the way up into the pelvic bowl. Untuck your tailbone, so extend back while you're pushing your palms into the floor. Look at your left foot and can you lift it up and tap it down? Lift it up and tap it down. Maybe it doesn't lift, which is fine. If it cramps, don't bring the leg in, but just chill with it extended. We're gonna do these little rainbows where you reach forward and back, forward and back. We're gonna do 5. And as you're doing this, you're noticing I'm doing it too. I'm side bending with my right rib. I'm gonna effort to keep my ribs contained on that opposing right side for 3, 2, and 1. Can you lift up, extend the heel for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's terrible. Right hand comes underneath your face. Can you squeeze your right buttock, right? Maintain engagement in that right buttock as you lift up, left arm rises. Feel that neural mist, feel that fatigue, support in that outer left hip. Exhale, down you come. Replace the hands, replace the knee. Second side. Hugging your right, or lifting up in that right arch all the way up into the pelvic floor. Okay? Notice if you're rounding your tailbone, I'll show you what that would look like in profile. So this is popular. Instead, find a sense of neutrality, right? And then begin your little rainbow lifts where you lift up and back, up and back. Again, if this is cramping immediately, that's normal, or that's common, I should say, right? And you're just going to imagine the leg would lift. Do 2 more. 1 more. Good, lift up and hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good, hand, foot comes down. Left hand plants underneath the nose. Squeeze your left hip so you're supported. Squeeze your left butt as you unfurl into this twist. Look at your left shoulder. Can you wrap that left shoulder externally? So look at that inner left elbow, and can you kind of wrap it towards the L of the thumb and forefinger? Exhale, hand comes down and knee comes down. From here, push down into the shins. Draw a sense of lift and buoyancy in this back body. Pressing down, can you rock your hips back ever so slightly, just enough that you can widen your hands. So we're going to be working into this sort of airplane shape, noticing that you're going to want to fall on your face, which is fine. We're going to be sort of tending here, okay? Sort of coasting. Inhale to widen, think your backs of your hands reach wide. You have wings moving away from your spine. And then exhale, up you come, hands to your hips. Pressing your right shin down, bring your hand to your frontal womb area, and then the back of your hand to your sacrum. Doesn't matter which one. Okay. And just assure here that you're not in this posteriorly tilted shape. Though this is common, we're just trying out something else. And now I'm here, I'll bring my hands to my frontal ribs. Take a breath in. Exhale. You'll see my frontal ribs come down and my back body widen. I now feel like pretty locked and loaded, pretty stable. I'm pushing my right shin down. Look where you want your foot to go. Step your left foot forward into a lunge shape. Now, moving from the sacrum, you're just gonna press that whole sacrum forward, coming into a low lunge. Your ASIS bones, those frontal hip bones, are staying even. One's not dropping, right? And then imagine you could squeeze that right buttock, your back buttock, to kind of pluck up in that whole posterior chain. I like a slightly shorter lunge here because I actually am interested in my knee moving past the ankle, right? I know that also seems like sacrilege, but what that does, just figure that out, knee past the ankle. As you do so, push down into your big toe mound of that right foot, and then bring your hand to your outer left calf. Roll that calf back as you push your big toe mound down. This will activate that whole outer line of the leg that we were just working, as well as lifting the arch. A lifted arch is a supported pelvic floor. So look, we can do that even in our lunges. Reach your arms up in victory for a supported female pelvic low lunge. Wow, feels amazing. Start to shimmy your ribs up away from your pelvis. Imagine your thumbs could lift higher than your pinkies to lift your back ribs up, and then take a few breaths here. Beautiful. Hands come down. rock back, firm ribs down, press right shin down, step back. Firming left shin down, squeeze the buttock, untuck the tail. Find your thumbs on your frontal ribs and your fingertips on your frontal hip bones. Take a breath in. Exhale, blow out those birthday candles. Front ribs move down without tucking the tail. Okay? From here, you press into that left shin. Place your foot carefully. Hand to the sacrum, hand to the womb. Shift your whole situation forward. Knee slightly past the ankle. Squeeze that left butt to plump up in your whole left pelvic region. Press your left big toe down, right? As you roll your right outer calf back. You see this arch is on the rise, arch on the rise, vaginal wall on the rise. Up you come. As we're working these simple adjustments, it's like, how do I bring more pelvic engagement and alignment and support? Really support being the key word into your yoga practice. Notice here, it's tempting to come here. Instead, really upper abdominal strength, gluteal strength. Beautiful. Hands come down, rock the situation back, firm your whole left gluteal as you step back. Fingertips come to plant in front of you, tuck all 10 toes, reach back to encourage pinky toe participation, and then bring your hands to your outer heels, or fingertips, I should say. Gently guide your outer heels in towards the midline, scoop the flesh of your knees up, and rock back. If this already sucks a lot, join the club. If it's like too much, tend your fingies, right? But we're gonna work here on opening the bottoms of the feet. As I said, wise, intelligent feet, lifted arches are, think of it like a straw, right? Like your feet are sourcing up from the earth, and it's sort of bringing all this moisture and movement and elevation all the way up to the cervix, because that's what's actually happening with your fascial tissue. So hooray, energize the feet, energize the pelvis. Take one more breath here. Tent the fingers, pluck the knees up off the floor. You're now in a low squat, right? With your heels lifted. Can you emerge your chest? Keep your tailbone, keep your frontal abdomen contained. Your tailbone is free as you slowly come to stand. Awesome. Okay. We finally made it to standing. How great is that? We're now going to look at Tadasana. And you're like, when we get to standing poses, I'm like, what standing pose is there other than Tadasana? Okay. As we just talked about, the feet, right? The feet are the pathway up and into the pelvis. So grab a block and a strap if you have one. I'll take my strap. I'm going to lay it down flat, and I'm going to place my block exactly in the middle. And by exactly, I mean approximately, but the closer to the middle you can get, the easier it'll be. My strap's a little short for whatever reason. That's what I could find. And then I'm going to step my feet onto this whole situation, right? So my arches of my feet, the strap is sort of on the arches, and now the block is going to be between my heels. My strap is too short for me. Well, it is what it is, I guess, right? So what you're gonna do, I don't know where my 10-foot strap is, but here we are. Oh, that's actually gonna help me. Okay, got it. So what you're feeling here, can you hug in with the heels? Hug them into the block, and then feel your inner ankle bones lift away from the block. You're gonna look down at the feet, and you're gonna see those inner arches rise. Another way I like to think about it is, can you imagine wrapping your outer calves backwards, or like you're opening jars of salsa with your feet, right? Just like turning them out. From there, you're gonna pull up on the strap. So your outer arches are lifting and your inner arches are lifting, right? Just take a second here. Coming into extension in the legs and activation in the feet. The image I want you to have with these arches lifting is that you're in a space of ascension all the way up to the cervix. Think of the little like pyramid. So your cervix is right here, right? It's at the top of your vaginal canal. So it kind of goes down in this like A-frame type shape all the way to the arches of the feet. So just feel here, aligning, and lifting along the midline. What this is not is squeezing your kegels or your butt. It's a lift. Nice. Find the center of your armpit and imagine it could ascend, right? And squeeze the block with your heels. Last thing, imagine your knees to kind of roll out to track over the second or third toe. Close your eyes, tune into the sensation in the feet. And then gently release the strap. We'll ditch that whole situation. Now we're going to come to stand in profile to you, and we're going to remember that work that we just did in the feet. The feet are the roots of all our standing poses, but certainly of Tadasana, right? So as I'm here, I'm going to work with that alignment in the feet, really energized. And I'll show you a little bit what is commonly done is this. Look, I'm standing in Tadasana. I'm standing up straight, right? We're going to ditch that, and instead, right, from this strong pelvic posture, notice what tends to happen is my hips are ahead of my feet. So instead of find that pubic bone right below the clitoral hood, find that sacrum, I'm just going to push my pubic bone back until now you see my hips are stacked over my pelvis. Hips are stacked over my pelvis. This in and of itself is likely going to put you in that subtle anterior tilt. What it also potentially did is hoisted your nipples up. So that same work, imagine that blanket roll was here. Inhale to widen your side ribs. Exhale, blow up birthday candles. Now I'm engaged in my frontal abdomen without tucking in my tailbone. Okay? Give me some flashers if you're like, whoa, I am feeling something here. All right, cool. You're here. This likely feels hard. Notice I still drifted forward because I'm just like everybody else. So I work on this stuff, right? Really keeping the center of my femur, right? My ASIS directly over, my like hip socket directly over the heels. We're going to work on this in one other way. So you're in this adjusted female pelvic posture. And now take your right fist and punch it into your left palm. Right fist, left palm. As you do this, can you really press? I'll show you what's happening in my upper back, right? So if you see that this tends to move in, spent a lot of time laying over yoga blocks, right? I'm now working to have it move out. So I'm untucking my tailbone and then, right, widening in my back and coming into engagement in my front body, right? And I'll stay here, bracing my whole rib basket open so I have more room for my lungs and diaphragm to expand within that basket. So inhale, fill the lungs, and exhale, engage in the frontal upper abdomen. Inhale, fill the lungs, engage in the frontal upper abdomen. The last two I'll have here is imagine you could press your elbows down on a table that was elbow height to really lift up through the crown of the head. Now, if your left palm is open, can you keep that left hip where it is, but gently twist to the right? Ooh, this is hard, right? That left hand is pressing into the right palm, right fist. That left hip is staying back. You're pushing down on that imaginary shelf and you're lifting up. This is a true twist, right? Imagine finding this sense of extension in all of your twists. And then exhale, unwind. And down you come. There's a difference between relaxation and collapse. So just relax, but don't collapse. And we'll come into the second side. Left fist into right palm. Be sure that the elbows are on the same plane. Start from the feet, right? And then up to the knees, lifting from the top of the cervix, drifting the hips back, exhaling, ribs down, and then press to widen in that upper back. Oh, this feels amazing to me. Hopefully this does for you as well. It's also quite challenging. Press down onto that imaginary table to really lift up and ascend through your midline. And your inhale widens your ribs, specifically the ones in the back. As you exhale here, push into your right heel, right? Imagine you could open that peanut butter jar with that right foot and then twist to the left. Keep lifting. Resist the urge to arc in the back. Instead, tailbone back, ribs down, find the rotation. The breath work here. Maybe you remember those golden threads in your pelvic floor. Exhale, they pyramid. Inhale, they spread. And then slowly unwind, relax, don't collapse. Now just notice, even after doing that, is it easier for you to maintain this female postural alignment? Tadasana, in my opinion, for the female body, is feet hips width distance, which I don't actually know anyone's hips who are 2 fists. So I would say it's slightly wider, specifically like feel your hips, right? Find your SAS, find your 2 fist distance. For me, it's about 3.5, right? So work with that true female pelvic hips width distance, right? Middle finger to middle thigh. Your back armpit moves forward and up. Your center armpit moves straight up. Your frontal armpit moves down. Tailbone untucked, ribs down, crown lifted. Tongue resting on the roof of the mouth, lips sealed, nasal breath. Tadasana. And gently release. Beautiful. We're going to bring this into a few standing poses in the time we have left. So grab your chair. I'll tidy my cross so this doesn't look like such a mess over here. Good. And then with your chair, have it on your sticky mat so it stays stable. Working with all of the same ideas, I'm going to wrap the pelvis back, and I'm going to come to a flat back shape here. This is not a forward fold, and in my opinion, a forward fold is anything that posteriorly tilts the pelvis, right? So I'm interested here in maintaining that neutral female pelvic alignment, right? This would be your Ardha Uttanasana shape, right? Take a breath here, hold on to the sides of your chair, step your right foot underneath the sole of the seat of the chair, and your left foot back. You're in this high lunge shape. Bend your right knee. I like slightly past the ankle. I think it helps activate the foot, which is intelligent for the pelvis, right? And you're here. You can choose to stay in this high lunge variation or hop your left foot to the left for Virabhadrasana 1. If you like that version, heel toe your right foot to the right. So you're not in that heel to heel, but slightly wider. Push into your left heel, roll your outer calf back, and activate in that right gluteal as you come up into the lunge. I find that this pose is largely about a few things, but the brain of the pose is that back heel. So can you find significant extension in that back calf? Angle your foot even more and like, whoa, your calf is alive, right? That inseam is alive. It's coming all the way up to the pelvis, right? You're in this subtle tilt, right? I'm shortening my stance so I can have that knee slightly beyond ankle. And even as I'm in this low back, sort of back bend, I'm going to bring my thumbs to my ribs and my hips, breath in. Exhale, they come down as my arms come up, right? A really stable version of Virabhadrasana 1. Imagine the ears could glide backwards. Just a breath here to really be pressing into that right heel, rolling that outer right calf back to hug that right gluteal towards the midline as I'm lengthening, I'd say like yawning through the back of that left kneecap. Hands to your hips, straight your front leg. Good. Heel toe slightly to the midline. You have your hand on that frontal hip crease. You're going to now kick your hips back. Notice the alignment I still have in that left foot. My left hip is combing forward. This is going to create a spaciousness in that left SI joint. Your chair is right there. Reach your hand for your chair. Maybe you scoot it a little closer to you, depending on the length of your arms and legs. My palm is here. My left hand is on my left hip. I like to lengthen my stance a little bit, right? And as I'm keeping this left hip grounded, I'm squeezing my left glute. I'm also reaching around to touch my right glute. And I'm keeping to work on that external rotation, that squeezing of the right glute. Think of the twist that we just did. Tailbone moves back, ribs move in, and then reach up with that left arm. Imagine it could press against a wall, and you find a true twist in the ribs. Trikonasana. An extended Trikonasana, prioritizing pelvic stability and thoracic mobility, or true twist in the upper back, or in the mid-spine, I should say. Inhale to breathe laterally. Exhale to twist. One more. Exhale, hand comes down. Scoot the chair forward. Place your palms onto the seat of the chair. Up level your back heel. Strengthen through that back arch. And step to your Adho Mukha Svanasana, your downward facing dog on the chair. Feel as though you can externally rotate the feet. I step in a little bit because my chair is sliding. Okay. Preparing for your second side. Angling that back heel for your warrior one, or lifting it for your high lunge, depending on your preference, as you step forward. Again, I like to bend the knee slightly past the ankle, right? I'm tapping the chair. That's what's keeping me honest here. Angling my back foot forward. I'm nursing a knee injury in my right knee, so really, this is a lot of work in the calf for me, so maybe it is for you as well, right? And I'm coming up to this Virabhadrasana 1 shape. Breath in to widen, breath out to contain. Reach up. I'm really pressing into that left heel, activating my left gluteal, back stroking the thumbs, back stroking the ears. What we're working with today is exploring these actions, lifting the feet, wrapping the calves back, right? Deepening the groins or pressing that pubic bone back and containing the frontal abdomen. These actions are going to be supportive in your practice. I came out of the lunge as I was talking. It's so hard. And then from there, slowly straightening the front leg. Hands to your hips. I'm going to swivel this around just so you can see me. Right? I'm here. I gently angle that foot forward. I'm still in this, hips shining, not square to the front of the room, but my right hip is pointing in line with my right foot, my left hip in line with my left foot. I'm prioritizing pelvic stability, not twerking in my SI joints, right? Prioritizing that alignment. From there, I'm going to kick my left hip back. My right hip is still shining at an angle as my hand comes to the chair. Depending on where your chair is, you can adjust it accordingly. I like to lengthen my stance here slightly. Breath in to move the tailbone back. Breath out to wrap that hip down. And then the true quick twist comes when you extend the arm up, press into the imaginary wall. That right hip moves down and that gives you something to work against in the twist. Stability in your pelvic bones rather than allowing them to be sort of tugged around by your mobility. 2 more breaths. Hand comes down, grip, grip, up level the back heel, extend here. This could also be a lovely place for press, whatever, I forget the name of this posture, right? The pyramid pose, good. And then you're slowly stepping back, right? Finding your downward facing dog. Here, even in your down dog, notice if you tend to kind of sway back, instead feel as though you could pull your arms apart on the chair. Lift up onto the balls of the feet. Maybe you come forward towards your plank pose. Here, this is often what's taught in plank. I, again, find the neutral to be supported with a press in the hands and a really active leg. Maybe you stay here. Maybe you bend the elbows to widen for the breast tissue to lift the chest up. Breath in. Exhale, pulling from the navel, hinging, lifting from the inner vaginal walls up and back. Slowly walking in and coming to stand. Find your Tadasana yet again. Middle finger to middle thigh, inner armpit on the rise, skull tipped back, groins deep, ribs contained. And just close the eyes and go through your list of actions that support your female body. And also just notice how you feel right now. What is the echo of this practice? Does this land with a sense of intuitive support? Or if this does feel quite foreign and you have all of the bells and whistles going off in your brain, you just pivot from that for a moment and tune into your somatic awareness. Does this feel good in your body? Inhale, reach the arms out and up. Sense of lift from the back body. And exhale, bending the knees, right? Coming to this camper's squat. I'm actually going to widen my feet slightly. Right? I'm here rather than the steep forward fold. I'm going to press the palms down. Attack the knees. I'll cross at my shins. And then come to sit back. We'll set up for a Shavasana here. What I'm going to recommend is that same pelvic cradle that we began with in our pranayama. So just reminding, you have this blanket. I'm actually going to use my chair as well. Right. So coming here and supporting this up. Oh, it feels amazing. And before we fully rest, we're going to lift our legs up. If this is over firming in the abdomen, you can grab a block. And put it underneath your hips. Or you can bunch up your blanket so it's underneath your hips. Okay. But the idea is your sacrum is supported, your tailbone isn't tucking, but your legs can drain. You can let your cervix fall into the body. For 3, for 2, and 1. If you adjusted your blanket, readjust back into that more supportive shape. Maybe if your chair is there, you can rest your knee pits on the chair. Hands to the ribs. Exhale, feel them weighted down. And rest. And just notice here, if your pelvis is resting a little heavier. If your hips are in low back, feel a little more ease. And the beauty of a online workshop is you can rest in Shavasana for as long as you'd like. But to be in the right relationship with our timing and have you bend your knees or release them from the seat of the chair. Press your hips up slightly to move the blanket and tip to one side. And then make your way up to seated. I recommend sitting in Virasana. If you're someone who has chronic SI joint or low back pain, that allows for an easier neutral female pelvic alignment than Tadasana or Sukhasana, those cross-legged seated variations. Coming to an uprighted posture, hand to the womb, hand to the heart. And just noticing here that in all of these cues, the womb drifts back, right? The whole pelvis drifts back and the breast tissue drifts back. the female sexual organs moving in to the female body, your female body being for you, rather than jutting them forward into the world or on display. The widening in the collarbones along with the widening in the shoulder blades. A wide breath in and a slow breath out. Thank you so much, women. We'll leave it there. And if you are interested in more of my work, I teach in-person retreats. I have one coming up in July. It's all about female pelvic health and movement from the female body. It's in Vermont. I have a few spots left there. I'm also teaching a feminist festival called Matriarch Rising that is in June in North Carolina. And I have a variety of different online programs. So follow me at Small Magic Birth, hop on my email list, and we'll stay in touch.